So you are getting a sheet of paper. And on the sheet of paper, you will notice, if you take a look at it, one of the values, when I asked you earlier today, what are the values that God imparts to the Israelite nation as they, and clearly I didn't make enough, so you're going to have to share. Here, coming over to this section over here. I got that section already. One of the surprising qualities, character traits, values that God instructs, or Moshe in this case, instructs the people of Israel to engage in is none other than, if you have a sheet of paper in front of you, joy. Joy. Which I have to tell you, when I thought about that, I found it to be quite surprising. I would not, at first glance, think of Deuteronomy as a book where God instructs the Israelite nation to experience joy. And yet that is exactly what our Torah portion today is filled with. I didn't think about it until I happened to glance at a drash that had been given some years ago by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And I was struck by this concept of joy. In Hebrew, how do we say joy? Simcha, exactly, Simcha. And if you look at the bottom of the text that you have, and I hope that all of you are able to glance at it, there are 3 questions that I asked. Question number 1, why do you think Moshe emphasizes joy, specifically in Dvarim, and certainly in this week's Torah portion? That's question number 1. Why? And I'm going to get to it in a second. Question number 2, what is the nature of the joy that the Israelites should experience? And number 3, where does the joy take place and why there? So to answer those questions, what I want you to do is take a quick read of 1 through 7 instances where you see joy in this parsha. Take a quick read, and if you don't have a text, I'll go over it. So for those who didn't see, in Deuteronomy 12, there in the presence of the Lord your God, you and your family shall eat and rejoice in everything you have put your hand to, because the Lord has blessed you. That's in the sanctuary. In Jerusalem, you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, your sons, your daughters, your men servants, your maidservants, and the Levites. The 3rd time, sacred food you may eat only in Jerusalem. Eat in the presence of the Lord your God at the place the Lord your God will choose, your son, your daughter, your men servants, your maidservants, your Levites. For the 2nd tithe, use silver to buy whatever you like, cattle, sheep, wine, or drink. Then you and your household bring it to the presence of the Lord and rejoice on the festival of Shavuot. Rejoice before the Lord your God at the place that God will choose as a dwelling for God's name. Who? You, your son, your daughters, your men servants, your maidservants, the Levites, the stranger, the fatherless, the widows. Same thing on the festival of Sukkot. Be joyful at your feast. You, your sons, your daughters, your men servants, your maidservants, the Levites, the strangers, the fatherless, the widows, and on Sukkot. 7 days you shall celebrate all the work of your hands, the harvest that God gave you. You can see there's a theme that repeats itself over and over and over again. What do you see here that when you see it so clearly, it is surprising? The questions: why does our Torah emphasize joy, simcha? Question number 1. 2, what's the nature of the joy? And 3, where does the joy take place? And when? So let's start with that last one, because that's the easiest. Where does joy take place? In the home and in with family, and in Jerusalem, and in where specifically in Jerusalem? In the temple. In the temple. Exactly. What do those things have in common when we think about Jerusalem and the temple? What's the nature of the joy that we're celebrating in those places? Say that again. We're eating and drinking for sure. No question about it. Lots of eating and drinking. It is very Jewish. Well, why is it very Jewish? Because you see, it's right here. There's holidays, Shavuot, Sukkot for sure. What's that? Because there is holy blessing. Where do we do it specifically again? Where is it most often done? In the temple, as opposed to in your home. What's the difference between doing it in the temple versus in the home? Exactly. Oh, let me hear that again. Let me hear that louder. Community. Exactly. We're trying to derive from these texts guiding principles for how we should be. What is, and I've spoken about this each time that I have spoken on Shabbat since we became Hamakom in July for the 2 Shabbatot that I was here. I've tried to find particular values in our Torah readings that demonstrate what are the values that we as Hamakom should hold fast to, should understand to be guiding principles of who we are as a community. So, obviously, a guiding principle of our community should be Simcha. And what is the nature of Simcha that we're looking at? Number one, it's done as community, together. Of course we can celebrate at home, and it's good to celebrate at home. And unfortunately, during COVID, we spent a lot of time at home. And it was very easy to turn on the television, the computer, and thank God for the technology to watch Chazan Mimi sing, or Chazan Stein sing, or Cantor Jackie sing, and one of the rabbis to speak and to teach and whatever else. And thank God we were able to do that. But now we can come back and we can be together, because being together is important. And who are we together with? Who is emphasized that we are together with? That we should yeah? Family for sure. Our sons, our daughters, our men servants, our maid servants. Who else should we be together with? Strangers. Why strangers would we be together? How is being with a stranger an expression of joy? Normally, when I think of a stranger, I don't think joy. What do I think of? Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I have to tell you, there was a moment that I watched this morning early on in services where Roseanne came in, right? Roseanne? And she was walking and she was looking, and the sanctuary was pretty empty early in the morning. And Miriam and Bob Carroll were sitting where they're sitting. And Roseanne looked at Miriam, and Miriam looked at Roseanne. And one of them is from the former Shomrei Torah, and one from Temple Aliyah. And they smiled at each other, and they looked at each other with joy and recognition. And Roseanne sat right next to Miriam. She could have sat anywhere, but she sat next to a new friend.
Yeah, well, so many people won't sit next to me.
And that moment for me was demonstrative of what Rabbi Vogel and I pray will happen at Hamakom. That we will not be strangers to one another. That we will recognize the face of every person, whether we know their name or not, and say, you are part of the same thing that I am part of. And I want to get to know you. I want to know your story so that I can experience simcha, joy, in knowing somebody else.
To me, all about just me. But what am I adding and bringing a smile to someone else as well?
Fumani, that is one of the most important principles, to experience true simcha, not happiness. Right? There's lots of words that we could replace simcha with. Give me some of them. Like happiness. Joy, what else? Celebration, pleasure, delight. But oftentimes, those can be done individually. There's something profound about Simcha. It could only be done in community. And it really needs to be done when I welcome somebody who is a stranger to me so that they can share my table, like your mother said. Bruce. There is no question, as Benzi said, that the Israelites kvetched plenty in the wilderness. Every other moment was a moment of oy vey. Oy vey. There's no food. There's no drink. There's no cholent. There's no water. I want to go back to Egypt. It was better there. And at some point, as we know, God lost God's mind with the Israelites, kvetching and complaining. And God is afraid. God is so afraid through Moshe in this Torah portion that what's going to happen is the Israelites are going to enter the land of Israel, and they're going to get comfortable, and everything is going to be given to them, and they're going to forget about their slavery. They're going to forget about what God did for them, and they're going to kvetch and complain all over again. And so, Benzi, as you said, it is central to acknowledge what God has done for us, what we have created, and make Simcha a central component of our community. Terry, and then Bert, and then we're going to...
able to get out how much we appreciate being able to come to community, so it makes us mindful.
No question, what Bert said is when we suffer in trial and tribulation, and then we walk out of that place, we begin to acknowledge so clearly the gifts that we have been given. And we have to always acknowledge those gifts. We should never take for granted who we are as a community hamakom. And there should be no such a thing as a stranger in our midst. There will be widows and orphans, fatherless. There will be those in need, whether that is a financial need or an emotional or spiritual need. It's our responsibility to look at the face of everybody who comes into this community and say, without you, I cannot experience the fullness of Simcha. I have that responsibility to bring you in, to share with you, to break bread with you, and to celebrate together. I know that's going to happen at Hamakom. And I look forward to, even today at lunch, seeing you sitting with people you don't know so that there are no strangers in our community. And like Roseanne and Miriam, that you recognize the face of a new person, and that person becomes a new friend. Shabbat Shalom.